Recordings in progress. All right. Jeff, can you see us?
Yes, I can.
We can see you very small. We'll make it bigger later, but this way we can see your presentation. All right, fantastic. Yeah, so as Kendra mentioned earlier, Jeff was with us in the early years of Renewal, and we actually started this church meeting in the Lenhart's home, and we met there for a while until finally we found a place. We started meeting at the elementary school, the Wax Elementary School, but then when COVID hit, I guess, you remember the 10 days to stop the curve or flatten the curve or whatever. At that time, like everybody was just like, okay, stay home. And because of that, we had to stop meeting at the elementary school. So we met virtually for about 6 or 7 weeks or something. And then we found the American Legion building and started meeting here. But everything began in the Lenhart's home, and we're extremely grateful to them. They're dear friends and family to us, and we miss them. And yeah, and so we're thankful that we can still, be with them virtually, even though they're far off, and it's not the same, obviously. But we're glad to have Jeff be able to teach. Jeff is he's an Old Testament guy, especially the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and there's some very interesting things that happen in Exodus, and so we'll see Jeff again as we teach through this book. And so with that, I'd just like to hand it over to Jeff. Did you want to just have us go through it together then from your slides?
Yeah, sure. If we could just have some volunteers, that'd be great. But I'd like to do a little bit of a setup first. And I want to thank you very much for inviting me to teach and be with you today. I was really looking forward to this. There's not a day that goes by that our family doesn't talk about how much we miss our Renewal Church family. So we really miss each of you. You're dear to us, and it's good to be together again with you. So just want to give a little bit of a setup here for us, an overview of what it is that we're going to be doing. We're going to move through a reading first, and that reading will be a significant portion of what we do because the section is so large. And I'll explain a little bit about why it is that we're treating such a large section as we go throughout move throughout the talk this morning. The second thing that we'll do is we will situate the text within the Pentateuch. Numbers 3 and 4 are the points, so I don't want to spoil the surprise, and then we'll finish off with some Q&A at the end. I do intend this to be somewhat of a conversation. I don't want to be preaching like a sermon here. I do hope that we can get some back and forth together. I'm not sure how that will work, just given the nature of the Zoom call. It would be a lot easier if I was there in person. But that's sort of the way that we'd like to go through it this morning. So to begin, can I have some volunteers for reading the text? And basically I'll put the slides on the screen. I have 2, 3. Well, there's 13 slides with text on it. So I don't know if we even have 13 people. Maybe we can have one person reading two slides each. But yeah, if we can get some volunteers, that'd be great. So who would like to volunteer for the first section?
Yeah, I'll start us off, Jeff. This is Levi.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna get a little bit closer.
Can you read this from there? Sorry.
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
Now the Lord said to Moses, "One more plague I will bring on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will surely drive you out from here completely. Speak now in the hearing of the people that each man ask from his neighbor and each woman from her neighbor for articles of silver and articles of gold. The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Furthermore, the man Moses himself was greatly esteemed in the land of Egypt, both in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people." Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I am going out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. from the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the millstones, all the firstborn of the cattle as well. Moreover, there shall be a great cry in all the land of Egypt, such as there has not been before, and such as shall never be again. But against any of the sons of Israel, a dog will not even bark, whether against man or beast, that you may understand how the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these your servants will come down to me and bow themselves before me, saying, Go out, you and all the people who follow you. And after that, I will go out. And he went out from the Pharaoh in hot anger.
Okay.
Who
Thank
wants the
you.
next? All right. Get it. Okay, Faith's going to read for us.
Great.
You read it?
Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders will be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, yet the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the sons of Israel go out of his land. Now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month they are each to take one lamb for themselves, according to their fathers' households, a lamb for each household. Now if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his neighbor nearest to his house are to take one according to the number of persons in them. According to what each man should eat, you are to divide the lamb. Your lamb shall be an unblemished male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to kill it at twilight.
It just got smaller.
Sorry.
Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat. They shall eat the flesh that same night, roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter hearts. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled at all with water, rather roasted with fire, both its head and its legs, along with its entrails. And you shall not leave any of it until morning, but whatever is left of it until morning, you shall burn with fire. Now you shall eat it in this manner, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in all haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live, and I will see the blood. I will pass over you, and no plague shall befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now this day will be memorial to you, and you shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord. Throughout your generations, you are to celebrate it as a permanent ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and another holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. You shall also observe the feast of unleavened bread. For on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening.
The next 2 slides. Tammy?
"7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is an alien or a native of the land. You shall not eat anything leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread." Then Moses called for the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go and take for yourselves lambs according to your families, and slay the Passover lamb. You shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood which is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and the 2 doorposts. And none of you shall go outside the door of his house until morning." For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. And you shall observe this event as an ordinance for you and your children forever. When you enter the land which the Lord will give you as he has promised, you shall observe this rite. And when your children say to you, what does this rite mean to you? You shall say, it is a Passover sacrifice to the Lord who passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but spared our homes. And the people bowed low and worshipped. Then the sons of Israel went and did so, just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did.
All right. Next two, anyone else? Jeremiah.
Now it came about at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. Pharaoh arose in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was no home where there was not someone dead. Then he called for Moses and Aaron at night and said, rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the sons of Israel, and go. Worship the Lord as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go and bless me also. The Egyptians urged the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we will all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes, within the clothes on their shoulders. Now the sons of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, for they had requested from the Egyptians articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their request. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Now the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, aside from children. A mixed multitude also went up with them, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. They baked the dough which they had brought out of Egypt into cakes of unleavened bread, or had not become leavened, since they were driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. Now the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. And at the end of 430 years, to the very day, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt.
All right, anybody else? Any volunteers? Kendra's gonna do the next one.
It is a night to be observed for the Lord for having brought them out from the land of Egypt. This night is for the Lord to be observed by all the sons of Israel throughout their generations. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner is to eat it, but every man's slave purchased with money after you have circumcised him, then he may eat of it. A sojourner or hired servant shall not eat of it. It is to be eaten in a single house. You are not to bring forth any of the flesh outside of the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. All the congregation of Israel are to celebrate this. But if a stranger sojourns with you and celebrates the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near to celebrate it. And he shall be like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. The same law shall apply to the native as to the stranger who sojourns among you. Then all the sons of Israel did so. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, and on that same day the Lord brought the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, sanctify to me every firstborn, the first offspring of every womb among the sons of Israel, both of man and beast. It belongs to me. Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you went out from Egypt, from the house of slavery. For by a powerful hand the Lord brought you out from this place, and nothing leavened shall be eaten. On this day, in the month of Abib, you are about to go forth. It shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which you swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall observe this rite in this month. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and nothing leavened shall be seen among you, nor shall any leaven be seen among you in all your borders. You shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt, And it shall serve as a sign to you on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a powerful hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year.
Thank you so much, everyone. I can read the last section here. Now, when the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and gives it to you, you shall devote to the Lord the first offspring of every womb, and the first offspring of every beast that you own. The males belong to the Lord. But every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. But if you do not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, What is this? Then you shall say to him, With a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. It came about when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore, I sacrifice to the Lord the males, the first offspring of every womb, but every firstborn of my sons I redeem. So it shall serve as a sign on your hand and as phylacteries on your forehead, for with a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I think the public reading of the word is something that is by and large lost within the church today. I think it brings great value, particularly for narrative sections, for us to read the word together corporately. It allows us to see what's there in the text, and even in a big section like this, where many would say, "Oh, you don't need to read all that. Just get what you need to say what you want to say." I think it does a disservice to the church. It's wonderful to hear faith in there as well, and it's a chance for the church body as a whole to together be in the word. So I think it brings us great value to be able to do that. It is a long section, chapters 11 verse 1 through 13 verse 16. But hopefully as we went through it, you could see how intertwined the section is together. And Kendra earlier today said, when she guessed at what I was speaking on, if it was the last plague or the Passover, yes, it's all of that and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. That's what our topic is today. So as we have now read that big section of text, I'd like to spend some time to situate that text within the Pentateuch. Now, question out there, because I say this word and I just kind of assume that people know it, but many people don't know what this word is. So if you don't, that's okay. What is the Pentateuch?
5 books.
Just any 5 books?
Yeah, no, just any 5 books.
The first 5 books of the Bible.
Right, the first 5 books of the Bible. So the Pentateuch refers to the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. For us as English readers, we treat them as 5 distinct and separate books. In reality, the Pentateuch really is one book. It is a book that is divided up into these 5 sections, most likely because of the length that they had for scrolls. And so the divisions that play out within the Pentateuch are there because of they just didn't have enough scroll to write on. It got too fat. And if you have ever got the chance to see some of these scrolls, you'll see just how big the sections are. So given that it's one book, the Pentateuch, it's one continuous flow. The Pentateuch as a whole is communicating something from the author. The book of Genesis, which Renewal has already gone through, forms the introduction for the Pentateuch. Exodus through Numbers, so Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers form one section, and they serve as the main body of the book. And then Deuteronomy forms the conclusion. It's the last section. kind of rehashes what took place. It mirrors the structure, the overall literary structure of the Pentateuch, and then it provides a conclusion and epilogue to the Pentateuch. So it's one book, and this is really important to understand. As I just said, just so everyone is on the same page here, what is the introduction? And I know I wish I was there because everyone just shouted out.
Everyone said Genesis.
Good. Glad to hear it. Genesis. Good. So Genesis is the introduction. And given that Genesis is the introduction, we should expect to see things that took place in the introduction repeated in some way throughout the rest of the narrative. And so it's really important to make these connections between Exodus through Numbers and the book of Genesis. In fact, the Bible as a book, as a whole, we think about the Bible as a single unified book, but in reality, the Bible in our English Bible has 66 books. Each of those are their own literary units that have their own message that book wants to convey. When we talk about the unity of the text of Scripture, we acknowledge the fact that there is no disharmony between the messages of each of the books. But when we actually go to study the Bible and read the Bible, we need to seek to understand what the message is of the books that we're reading. So for us today, we've just read a huge passage. But what we want to do is we want to situate that within the Pentateuch. Where does this fall within the story, within the book of the Pentateuch? And so I want to start off and ask this question: what kind of literature is this? What kind of literature is this section that we just read?
Somebody said historical narrative.
Okay, historical narrative. Okay, very good. It is narrative. It is it's a telling of a story, and we can see that very clearly as we go through it. And I think Kendra mentioned in the announcements that the women will be doing a book by Howard Hendricks on interpreting, and you're talking about genre. Well, that's exactly what we're asking right here. What genre is this book? And it's narrative. I have a very good commentary here. I'll show it up. I don't think you can read that because it's probably backwards, but the commentary is by John Sailhammer, and it's called The Pentateuch as Narrative. And it's really, when we think of the Pentateuch, most of the time we think about and we associate the Pentateuch with laws, right? This is where the law was given. And so Leviticus is entirely law. And yet it's really interesting when you think about the Pentateuch that it is, even the law sections are cast in terms of narrative. It's not just simply law or legal code. It's law and legal code, but it's in the context of a story. So it's the Lord said to Moses, and Moses said to the people. There is got an echo there. Sorry, that's a little distracting, threw me off. The Pentateuch is cast in terms of narrative. So the question that we run into then is really, how do we interpret narrative? And so this is something I'd like to spend a little bit of time on together with you. It's really, well, I should say it's more of a simple task to interpret the epistles, say. So these are the letters of Paul, the letters of Peter, the letter of James, the letters of John. It's a little bit more easy of a task to interpret those because of the nature of those writings. The writers are just providing propositional statements. They're just giving statements that we can read, and we can basically get the meaning. Story works a little differently, doesn't it? Story it's not quite as simple, maybe is the right word, to interpret narrative. I think the message communicates to us and resonates with us a little stronger through story, but it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to understand what the author is saying. When you think about story, and this is what narrative is, we talk about, so the most familiar type of story that we have today would be, TV shows and movies. It's narrative, and there's usually a message that's hidden in there. In fact, that's what much of the uproar about Disney was lately, right? The overt messaging that they work into their story as they communicate, so that the programming that they provide is not it's not benign, it's not innocent, it's not teaching basic life skills. It's teaching things in line with a social agenda. Stories are a powerful way to communicate. And so what we want to do when we look at a story is we need to understand how the parts contribute to the whole. We take a look at the development of the plot, right? We take a look at the characters. I guess that's the next part. Take note of the characters, the places, the events, and we watch as the author links these things together, and he establishes this tapestry, and we kind of follow along as we get to the crucial section of the plot, and then perhaps there's some conclusion at the end where the author will wrap things up. What I think happens when Christians interpret narrative in the Bible is that we have this tendency to rely on things like word studies, for example. And so we take a look at a word, and then we want to go, okay, well here, a lamb. Whoa, what is a lamb? And I'm going to go do a word study, and then I'm going to draw this out. I'm going to see how lamb is used in the entirety of Scripture, and then I'm going to weave together this understanding of lamb and how it affects the passage. That type of word study really is, it works against a correct understanding and interpretation of the narrative. Narrative is not the kind of thing that you look for these definitions of words and you link them together. It's very important with logical writing. So like the epistles, it's very important that we know what the words mean in the context that the author is using in order to understand what it is that the author is saying propositionally. Now, hopefully I haven't lost anyone here. But with narrative, words can be very important, but they're used in a different way. And so if I can give an example here, Little Red Riding Hood, everyone is familiar with this story. What happens towards the end when the wolf is there in the bed with the grandma's clothing on, and Little Red Riding Hood is there? What happens? What does Little Red Riding Hood say?
Does anyone here remember?
He says, what big ears you have.
Yep. And
then what big eyes you have, and what a big mouth you have. Right.
The author there, so whoever created that story, they're using these questions that the Little Red Riding Hood is asking to sort of heighten the anticipation about what's to come and to create suspense, right? And it comes from the repetitive use of questions. So we take a look at words, the way that the author is using words. How are they using phrases or types of sentences to heighten tension or increase suspense? What about the Three Little Pigs? What does the wolf say to the Three Little Pigs?
think most of us know this one. I'll huff and puff and blow your hair. Yeah.
There you go. And it's and look, all of us know it, right? Huff. Do I need to go in and look at the definition of what huff is, and how is it used in 16th century English, the English world? I don't need to know that, right? I know what huff is, and I know what puff is, and the fact that it's being used and it's being repeated is a structuring of the story to again heighten suspense here. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house, not by the hair of my chin chin. These repetitive phrases that are being used. Whoever created those stories, they're using those phrases to draw the reader's emotions through the story and help get you to see like where the story is going. Like, oh no, what's going to happen when they get to the brick house? Is the brick house going to get blown down too? No. Well, there's a difference in the brick house. The brick house doesn't get blown down. They're able to defeat the wolf. Hooray. Moral of the story: brick is a better building material than stone or than straw and hay, whatever it is. So the story is communicating, it's using words in a particular way, and it's doing so to heighten suspense. So when we interpret narrative, it's not so important to narrow in and focus on the individual parts. It is important to get a sense of what's going on. And that's why I think, in fact, when Levi and TC and Jeremiah told me that you guys were going to go study Exodus, I said, I'm very concerned about that, because there's a tendency to focus in and sort of lose the sense of the whole as you examine the parts. And it can be very difficult to do big swaths of narrative, precisely for the reason that it takes so long to read through it. That's why we read through it today, because it's more important that we get a sense of what's going on. So with that being said, many of you have seen this before. This is an overall, the shape of the Pentateuch. And to explain this, the green sections represent narrative, like true narrative, the kind of narrative that we just read. The blue sections represent legal code. That's the literary style of those sections. They're actually legal code that are inserted into the text. And those big yellow sections are major poems within the Pentateuch. I don't know if you can read those numbers very well, but our section today, where does that fall? What color is it?
It's hard to read the verse references there,
Yeah.
but we're saying green.
Yeah, good job. Green. It is green. So it falls. Can you see my mouse cursor? Or no?
No. Oh, there it is. Yep.
Okay, so it falls right here. Okay. Now I want to point this out, because this is it's really an interesting facet of the way that the text is shaped. Everything is narrative up to this point. I mean, there's these large poems, and I'm not going to get into what those mean today, and why they're there, but everything is narrative. It's just story right up to this point. And there's a reason why when people on January 1st, when they say, okay, this year I'm going to read through the Bible in a year, they fizzle out when they get to the book of Leviticus, because it just gets boring to read when you get into these broad sections of legal code. But everything is narrative here. So this text has not yet introduced any legal code. There's no legal statutes that have been provided to the nation of Israel. It's just story. But we're coming to the end of the narrative section, and the end of the narrative section occurs in Exodus 19, which is a pivotal moment in the Pentateuch. And this we're kind of setting up to get there. So where we're at in the Pentateuch, we're still in the major narrative section, and and we're coming to the end of that section. Now, what does the the text achieve overall? If I were to ask, how about, let me change that. Let me ask, what does the text achieve? What is the purpose? And what I mean by that is, like, what is the purpose of these sections? What would be your thoughts having read it together? Does anyone have a thought on why this text is there? What purpose does it serve?
One of the things that stands out to me is it's basically a completion of what Joseph said at the end of Genesis about the 400 years. You're going to be in slavery for 400 years, and you're going to come out. And so it's a completion to that.
That's great. And there's a whole verse that deals with that, right? I mean, it makes it explicit. So that's great. It's a great connection to what came before. Any other purposes for this?
Silent. Maybe some hints.
So this text serves as a essentially it's a launching point where now you have the children that are of Israel that are enslaved, and they aren't enslaved anymore. They're set free, right? And so there's this text serves as this moment where the children of Israel are exited. The whole term Exodus, it's starting here, right? So this text is serving as that part in the nation's history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge moment in the history of Israel. And so it's communicating just that, just what took place. Any other ideas?
Gives a background of the Passover.
Okay, great. It gives a background of the Passover. For those of you who don't know, that was my father.
That must be
He's
Jeff's
also
dad.
joining us here. Yeah, so this gives the background of the Passover. The Passover, obviously a huge remembrance feast throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. Any other thoughts here? Okay, well, all of those are good. And this is where that sort of narrative becomes a little bit more opaque when we're interpreting it, right? There can be multiple reasons for a narrative to be in a certain spot. It doesn't mean that there's more than one interpretation, but there could be several things that a text is setting out to achieve. One of the things that this text is achieving is that it demonstrates God's status as the creator king of the universe. And this is very important. Where in the book so far has God been demonstrated to be the creator king of the universe?
Okay, guys, we've covered this.
And when I say the book, I mean the Pentateuch. Genesis, yeah. Where though? In Genesis.
In the beginning.
Yeah, Genesis 1. Genesis 1 sets out God as being the creator king of the universe. He's the one through whom the authority, he has the word, the spoken word that has the authority. What he speaks is done. And he's shown to be the creator king of the universe. This passage that we just read does the same thing. It demonstrates that he is the creator king of the universe, not Pharaoh. And as I was listening, I tried to listen to several of the previous sessions that you've done on Exodus. And I've noticed that the question has been asked many times throughout your series. why the plagues? And the Pentateuch itself, I'll just give the answer because we don't have that much time. The Pentateuch itself confirms that the plagues demonstrate God's power over the Egyptian gods. So we see that in chapter 12, verse 12. And the book of Numbers also confirms that in Numbers 33. There's a statement that says, when talks about God executing judgment on the gods of Egypt. I know you've done some of this background. You talked about, well, did some of the plagues match up to some of the gods of Egypt? Well, yes, they did. Absolutely. The text is telling us that God did this to execute judgment on the gods of Egypt. He is demonstrating himself to be the creator king of the universe. The Pharaoh bore the title son of Re. We think about this God as being Ra, but it's Re. The Pharaoh was the god of the Egyptian state. Now, when the pharaohs would have sons, their firstborn son was thought to be divine. So that brings quite a bit of context into why this 10th plague is targeting the firstborn son. As God is in direct conflict with Pharaoh, he strikes to the heart and says, this child is not a god. Pharaoh is not a god. I am God. I am the creator, king of the universe. And so it's a demonstration of his power and of his rightful role as the creator, king of the universe. What's interesting, I know you made reference to who the Pharaoh was before, and I'll just add on to that. Thutmose IV was a Pharaoh who was not the eldest, and his rule was said to be conferred on him by the gods, not by his own divine right as a god himself. So we actually have from history some confirmation here about this taking place. Thutmose III was who we believe to be the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus, and his son Thutmose IV was not the eldest, interestingly. The power of God over the Egyptian gods confirms his status. So that's what I wanted to hammer in here. It confirms his status as the creator king of the universe. And then we're about to get into the Red Sea event. And the Red Sea event will explicitly do something else. It will incorporate redemption into the creative activity of God. But we've already got redemption here in the 10th plague and the Passover, because we have the firstborn sons in Egypt were all supposed to die. And so this section here connects God's provision with an act of redemption. When we were going through Genesis, we talked a lot about how man is, like, the message of Genesis is that man is to trust in God to provide the good. And here now in this section in Exodus, the author, Moses, is providing us with a narrative that connects God's provision of the good with redemption. What is God's good provision for us? It is redemption. That's what it is. God provides his provision. In what way? He redeems his firstborn son. Who is God's firstborn son? Israel, that's right. And we read that in Exodus 4. So God redeems his firstborn son from slavery. And so in this sense now, redemption becomes associated with God's good provision for his people. I don't know, I can't really see into the crowd, so I don't really know who's all there. I don't know how many have I don't know if you've engaged with this idea before or not, or made it explicit. What we're doing today, we're looking at the text of Exodus and we're trying to understand Exodus in its own rights. And that's why I'm not going through and connecting right now to the New Testament and Jesus. There's a tendency when we look at, okay, the Passover, oh, that's Jesus. Jesus is the Passover lamb. But what I think is more important for us to see is what the text itself is stating. And here what we're seeing is God's good provision is connected with redemption. That's what gives the Passover its significance. And that's what makes it significant that Jesus is said to be our Passover lamb. Because him acting as a Passover lamb, within the context of Exodus, he's acting as God's good provision in redeeming his people. And that's why we have those sentiments of being redeemed from slavery as believers. The New Testament is echoing what is communicated throughout the Pentateuch. The third thing that this text does is it establishes the importance for God's people to remember his redemption. The Passover feast and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, these are connected with the 10th plague specifically. It's connected with the fact that God, in his judgment against the gods of Egypt, killed the firstborn sons, every firstborn, not just firstborn of humans, but also animals. And he redeemed his people. And so the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, these are brought forward here in this text to establish how important it is for the nation of Israel to keep this event in their minds, to remember when God redeemed his people from slavery. The issue of redemption here, and this is, I should have said this as well. What did God redeem his people from? If we're reading the text here, what is it that God redeemed his people from?
Slavery.
Slavery. That is one thing that he redeemed his people from. What else?
Somebody said sin.
Sin? Not here.
The angel of death passed over them.
Death. Slavery and death. He redeemed his people from slavery and death. They should have died, but for the blood of the Passover lamb. They were in slavery, and this is how God would bring them out. We'll just leave it at that. So the final thing that I have for situating the text, the other purpose of this, as Jeremiah kind of alluded to, is it prepares us for the coming meeting at Sinai. And when you look at the shape of the Pentateuch, from Exodus 19 all the way through to somewhere in Numbers, I can't remember the exact spot. The people are at Sinai. They're just there at Sinai, and they're wandering in the wilderness of Sinai. There's this huge section that just deals with Sinai. And so the text is preparing us for the coming meeting at Sinai. And when we deal with Exodus 19, we'll talk about what that meeting is. But I wanted to bring that up here at this point. Okay, so we're going to move and talk about redemption as God's good provision. That's what we're going to shift to now. God, as we mentioned, God is directly confronting the Pharaoh throughout the 10 plagues. He is right up in Pharaoh's face, challenging him directly. I know you've spoken about this many times before, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. It occurs again in this passage. And there's always that question, what does the hardening of Pharaoh's heart mean? Well, Pharaoh's hardening of his heart should be seen through the description of the events. And so what happens in these events? Like what is the atmosphere of these narrative sections? As we just said, God is directly challenging Pharaoh's claim to divinity. And so he engages in battle with him. This is the plagues are effectively God in battle with Pharaoh. He is challenging him directly, and he's fighting against the Pharaoh. Now, obviously, the Pharaoh is outmatched, and that's part of the point of these narratives, that God is the creator, king of the universe. He's outmatched, but as someone who is outmatched, who thinks of himself more highly than he should, very arrogant man, what is his response? Well, he becomes enraged. The Pharaoh becomes enraged. Like, I can't believe that I'm being beat. And so while the plagues kind of have this initial effect on him, he's like, oh, fine, yes, let's go. He just becomes enraged, and he doubles down on his arrogant resistance to the rightful king. And so this reaction of Pharaoh and his hardening of heart is caused by God through the direct challenge he makes to the Pharaoh. It is not caused through compelling the Pharaoh's will. It's through these events, it's this direct challenge that God is hardening his heart, because God is doing things to him. He is engaged in battle, and he's beating him. And so Pharaoh, just rather than, okay, accept things, like someone who's getting beat at something that they think that they should win, he just doubles down, and he goes even harder to try to win. Goes even more, he's even more obstinate. He doesn't want to let the people go. It's much like the Canadian government right now, but that's a political thing. He doubles down in anger, and that's what's spoken of as the hardening of his heart. It's not that God is overriding the will of Pharaoh. It's that God is, through his direct challenges to Pharaoh, causing Pharaoh to, it's going to cause him to respond in some way. Well, it's causing him to respond in arrogance and defiance of the creator king of the universe, the rightful king. Pharaoh is pictured as, so he's cast in a character type that we've already seen in Genesis, and we've seen it several times. He's being cast as this arrogant and defiant man. That's what we see with Cain and Lamech in Genesis 4. It's what we see about humanity as a whole in Genesis 6. It's what we see in Nimrod in Genesis 10, and the sons of men in Genesis 11. There are these arrogant characters that play out in the beginning of the book. Pharaoh is just another one of those. He's cast in the same light as those arrogant and defiant antagonists towards God. And so this section is providing us with this view of God's redemption. He is conquering Pharaoh. God is king. And what do kings do? They wage battle. What is God doing here? He's waging battle, and he's conquering Pharaoh. And through conquering, he's redeeming his people from slavery. Now, throwback time to the book of Genesis once again. What does that sound like? Where have we seen this before? A direct confrontation between kings and a redemption of people from slavery.
Abraham and the battle of the 5 kings. right? And then right
Yep.
before the priest, the high priest,
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek, yeah.
That's bang on. It's exactly right. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want you to see how these texts connect back there, because what we saw in Genesis, we see in Exodus, and all throughout Exodus through Numbers, we see the same things. God is conquering Pharaoh in the same way as Abram conquered the kings who took Lot captive. I'll just leave it at that. So there's this section that connects there with Genesis 14. Now, he does this through plagues. What does that connect with in the book of Genesis?
Genesis 1.
Nope.
Dang it.
Who else went to
Tristan,
Egypt?
Tristan said, what'd you say, Tristan? Genesis 6.
No. Good guess. Genesis 12. Who else goes to Egypt?
Oh,
Abram.
Yes. Okay.
Abram goes to Egypt. He lets his wife be taken into Pharaoh's house, and Pharaoh's house is struck with plagues. So once again, the usage of plagues, like we may say, well, why did he do that? Well, it connects back with what we've already seen in Genesis. So these things they're not new, they're not out of the blue. We've already encountered them. Excuse me. Okay, so yeah, okay. In terms of the connections, what I want you to see is that okay, so who does Abram in Genesis 12, who does Abram come out with?
Lot.
Yeah, Lot. Very good. So Lot is actually he's picturing this mixed multitude. Who comes out with the Israelites? This mixed multitude comes out. And just like Lot caused problems for Abram, the mixed multitude will end up causing problems for Israel. And you'll see that, well, if you ever get down to the book of Numbers, you'll see that the mixed multitude are called the rabble later on. But you have these parallels, and I just want to draw attention to these parallels because it's important for us to see. Okay, this is not new. So overall, God's good provision for his people is to redeem them from death. The firstborn should have died, but they didn't, because why? Why did the firstborn of Israel, of Israel's people, not die? Did the people do something?
Tam said because of the blood that they
Okay.
found on the doorposts.
That's right. In the text that we read today, it says the people did what they were told. Basically, they trusted God and they did what he asked. The book of Hebrews, chapter 11, specifically brings up Moses and this event, and he says it was through faith that he applied the blood onto the doorposts. Something that we talked about in the book of Genesis is that trust is equated with obedience. With Abraham is said to have obeyed because he trusted. And when we see the people of Israel being obedient, it's an example of their trust in God. And so what we see here is the people are trusting God. They have seen him already act in these plagues, and they've seen how they've been protected through many of them. And now they're trusting in God once again. Not one household did not do this. And so because of their trust in God, they were redeemed. They were able to survive this execution of judgment. So that's the sort of narrative section. But we also get in much of chapter 12 and in that early portion of 13, we get the commemorating the redemption. And the two commemorative rites that are given to Israel are the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are, as we've already said, they play a significant role in the life of the community of Israel, the nation of Israel. The Passover, obviously in this passage, God is telling them the importance of keeping it, of remembering. When it comes to the Passover, what is the purpose of the Passover? When they eat the Passover, what is to happen between them and their children?
Anyone even remember?
I know it was a huge section.
Just give it time.
Well, they were told to explain what these things mean, right? So
Not quite, not for the Passover.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, so I mean, I can read the passage again. Was
Remember?
it the something
What would
about
What would the kids do?
I remember it saying something about the firstborn redeemed, but I can't I have to find it.
So in chapter 12, verse 20, hold on a second. I didn't write down the references. The difference between the two is this. In the Passover, the children are asking,
Okay.
they're asking, what is this all about? And then the adults respond, the parents respond to their children, and then they explain it. So Jeremy, you weren't fully wrong. You were correct, but it was in response to the kids asking questions. So the Passover is meant to spark curiosity in the children. And I think that's a really interesting feature that is included in this passage. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, on the other hand, was a chance for the parents to instruct their children, to teach them about these events. The feast itself was a demonstration about what took place. The Passover was meant to spark curiosity and have the children ask questions. Sorry, I had to sneeze and then I lost it. So this section of commemoration now is established, and it's given great importance. The text is really, and God in speaking to the people, well, speaking to the people through Moses, he's communicating to them just how important it is for them to remember. Remember this event, commemorate this. This should be at the heart of your national identity. This should be at the heart of your community. Remember this redemption that I provided for you. Remember. Now, the purpose of the Passover here, in verses 13 and 27, it reminded Israel of the Lord's salvation when he passed over their houses and delivered their firstborn. Oh man, I'm almost done here. So it's important to recognize that this occurs before the giving of the law at Sinai. And the Passover obviously playing this role of redemption. This is why, as we already alluded to, the New Testament writers compare Christ to that Passover lamb. On several occasions in the New Testament, he is compared with the Passover lamb. and he was killed during the days of the Passover feast. There was a Jewish tradition that anticipated that the Messiah would come during Passover, and that was fulfilled when Jesus came. Now, I'm just going to wrap it up here because we're out of time. But what we read from these short chapters, what we see in these sections is that God provides the good of redemption, and that is deliverance from slavery and death. And it's fitting for his people to remember the provision of God. I know that you do the remembrance meeting together. It is a symbolic remembrance of the good provision of God in redeeming us from slavery and death. And so that's what we see from the book of Exodus, and that's what we obviously have in the life of the church. I'm going to open it up for a short amount of time for any questions that anyone may have.
Anybody have any questions for Jeff on Exodus or whatever?
Well, not whatever, but
Oh. All right, go ahead. Jeremiah, you had something.
You said that the plagues echo or call back to the Battle of the Five Kings. I was wondering how, like
Sure.
what in the text is there that reflects back to that?
So it's God in, okay, so in the Battle of the Five Kings, what you have is you have Lot being taken by the kings, and it says it was the time of year the kings go out to battle. You have these 4 kings war against 5 kings, and the 4 kings win, and they take Lot with them. And then Abram goes out and he whoops them all and gets the people back, right? He gets the people back. It's in that God is in the plagues. He is directly confronting. He's doing battle with another king, Pharaoh. And through that battle, it's through that 10th plague in specific, but all of these plagues contribute to his conquering that king and redeeming his people, getting the people back. And so it's that scenario is alludes back to that portion in Genesis 14.
But yeah, okay, so it's not necessarily the mechanism of the plagues themselves that is calling back. It's the
No,
it's
no.
the themes of it's the redemptive theme and the kingship that's calling back to it. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and the plagues themselves that alludes back to Genesis 12, right? The usage of the plagues is God used plagues in the household of Pharaoh to redeem Sarah back to her husband.
Right, gotcha.
My wife just pointed something out to me. It's not really a question, but it's interesting. It's in Genesis 14 during the battle. It says he divided his forces against them by night, which I don't know if that's
By
interesting
night.
connection to the 10th plague. I don't know. It's just interesting. It's there. So
What is the 9th plague?
darkness,
Yeah.
and the Passover occurred at midnight.
Yep. Something I didn't touch on, I probably should have. At the end of chapter 10, Moses says, "You're right. I shall never see your face again." And then in chapter 11, all of a sudden we see Moses talking to Pharaoh, and the simple solution there, the simple answer to this is that the text is not chronological. So it's likely that Moses had already had his discussion on the 10th plague with Pharaoh back in chapter 10, but it's just communicated afterwards, which is something that happens quite frequently within Old Testament narrative.
Any questions? Anything? Anybody? We're kind of low today. A lot of families are traveling or doing camps and stuff, and so Tristan has one. Oh, never mind. He was just waving at you, Jeff.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed being here with you. Let's just close in a word of prayer. Lord God, we thank you so much for who you are, and we thank you for your son, Jesus. Lord, we thank you that you have demonstrated that you redeem your people, that you are the King of the universe, the creator King of the universe. And we're just so thankful that you have provided us with the good of Jesus Christ in order to redeem us from slavery and death. Father, we thank you for Renewal. We pray that they would continue to grow in character, that they would continue to grow in love for one another, and be a shining light to the community of Waxhaw as a testimony to the power of the gospel. Lord, we just thank you so much for all that you are and all that you are doing for us. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Jeff. Did you want to stick around in case anybody wanted to talk to you? Or, I mean, if you got to go, that's fine too. But we can.
Sure,
There's Carissa. All right, so we'll get the camera kind of set up over here. If you want to say hi to everybody, so.
Sure. Oh.
Jeff, I'll get things kind of set up over here and then people can come over and
Sure.
talk to you. If you want to, let's see, you should be able to,
Stop
if you want to
sharing
stop
that.
your screen. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I can do it right here. Boom.
Nice.
Okay, Seth's unplugging his camera for a second. He's moving his camera.
Yeah, one second.
Got it? All right, we got the camera here. Just gotta.
I'm gonna pull up.
He's moving the camera so it's by the TV more, and not directly in front of the speaker. Yeah, he can't see you yet. You can talk to him though.
Hi, Carissa.
So loud. All right, come over here. All right. He's getting the camera set up here real quick.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
All right, is it on?
Nope.
Hello.
Hey.